So thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation in this Scripps Technical Forum with Ocean Aero. We're super excited for the talk today with Drew Stevens. My name is Vanessa Scott, and I work in Industry Relations and Innovation at Scripps. Douglas Alden, who is the chair of the Scripps Technical Forum and lead engineer for the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, normally moderates these sessions, but he's working in the field this week, so I am standing in today. And Gwen Nero, Director of Corporate Affiliates, Business Development, Industry Outreach, and Innovation, also helps support this seminar series. So if you guys are new to this, we do welcome a very interactive discussion. We encourage everyone to ask questions in the Q&A button in the bottom center of your screen, or please feel free to enter them in the chat as well. If you'd like to unmute and ask a question, we can go ahead and do that too. Just raise your hand so I can go ahead and do that. I think for time's sake, we will kind of hold the questions to the end. Thank you all for submitting some questions beforehand. We did get those to Drew, so he has incorporated some of the answers to those in his presentation. Also, some housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and will be posted on the Scripps Technical Forum playlist on the Scripps Oceanography YouTube channel, which is great. Also, you can find that and more information on upcoming presentations on our new STF website, which we'll put in the chat in a bit. We welcome all of your feedback and suggestions on potential topics and speakers. So if you have anything in mind or something that you'd like to hear about or someone you'd like to hear from, please let one of us know, myself, Douglas, or Gwen, and we can work to help coordinate that. And with that, I would like to introduce today's speaker and topic. We're going to be hearing about the Triton, which is Ocean Aero's dual-modality autonomous platform. And we're going to be hearing from Drew Stevens, the VP for Geosciences at CPC Inc. Drew is the VP for Geosciences at CPC Inc. and is a geographer with 30 years in natural resource applications of GIS. Since the Gulf oil spill in 2010, Drew has specialized in ocean GIS with almost 10 years as the Esri Oceans Industry Manager, and now is serving as CPC and large group of NOAA Office of Marine Sanctuaries staff with GIS applications and related technology. He also supports the scientific applications of the Ocean Aero Triton AUSV, manufactured here in San Diego. Drew, I will hand it over to you.
All right, well, thanks a lot. Let me get my screen shared out there. Everybody seeing that full screen?
Looks great.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the intro, and please pass my thanks to Gwen for lining this up. We've been talking about it for quite some time, and just want to share that I'm quite familiar with the series. I've watched several of them, and I've been on and off campus for about 10 years. Back when I was working with Esri, Don Wright and I would come down and do different presentations. So pretty comfortable on campus there, and excited to talk today about this. So we'll jump right in. This Ocean Aero Triton class vehicle exists. It's the third generation of vehicles that they've developed. And I'll tell you why some guy from CPC is presenting Ocean Aero technology in a little bit, but I'll cut to the chase that it's just a fantastic partnership and we've gotten to know each other quite well. So what I'm going to do, and if you remind me, I'll put this link in the chat window. There's just a little video. It's sort of just a little teaser video that shows the vessel in action a little bit more. But cutting right to the big deal, if you will. This is, from what we understand, the only true autonomous underwater and surface vessel. And you know, when you're on the surface, you can dive to avoid detection or avoid hurricanes. One of my fantasies at the moment is to get one under an approaching hurricane in the Gulf and come up and take data and video from the eye. We'll see, and that could even communicate with aircraft, hurricane hunters and whatnot. And then, you know, on the underwater side, you know, you can come back up and recharge. You can create extensive long duration data collections because it can keep going and charging and going and charging. So it's a really interesting class of a USV. Ocean Aero's targeting these broad markets. These are really broad, but of course the defense folks are interested for a lot of obvious reasons and some surprising, not so obvious ones. In science and research, you know, for you all, what we'd really talk about is what's covered by this. It says mid-ocean and bathymetry. We are working a Norbit multi-beam echo sounder onto one of the vessels this summer, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. But any kind of sensor that you've already thought about that's relatively small and capable can go on this vessel. And then we were a little surprised at the unsolicited interest from the energy sector. It's not just oil and gas, but also the wind energy. They're spending so much money inspecting and maintaining infrastructure that they see a means to drop their risk and safety exposure and save money by putting these out there to do some basic infrastructure maintenance. So that's just sort of where these things are targeted. You know, jumping into the, I know it's a lot of words, I'm not going to read any of them, but the boat here is a single rudder with comms on the back here on these conning towers. Of course, the sail retracts. It will soon have a solar panel on it, on each side of it as well. The whole top deck is basically a solar panel. And it's really interesting. They're not just glued on, they're glassed in to prevent any kind of bubble problems at depth. The vessel's rated to 200 meters for dives. AIS capacity, and then these dual thrusters to move it along underwater or on the surface if the wind's not doing the trick. So, you know, here's some of the other specs in the lower left. I'm not gonna start reading all that, but 5 knots, that's in good wind with some thruster support. So basically motor sailing. And, you know, you're really looking at 2 knots anywhere else for the most part. 14 feet long, 3/4 or 770 pounds. And, you know, here's the follow-up to the big deal: solar and wind powered, scalable. We'll get into some of these things in a couple minutes. But that's a vessel in a nutshell. And then back to purpose. You know, of course, in the defense world, they're just really interested in this whole ISR reconnaissance stuff. And if something is detected, of course, remotely sending that back to human eyes to process. The swarming concept is being worked on as we speak, and that's to allow, you know, coverage of whether it's ISR or even some other kind of oceanographic or mid-ocean or chemical data that you're collecting. The whole concept of collecting in a swarm, of course, covering more ground at once. So those are the bigger concepts. One of the questions that came up from you all was about launch and recovery, and I thought, here's where pictures really tell a story. So this first picture on the left is showing the single pick point in the middle. It can handle the whole weight of the vessel. And you see there's a bow line and a stern line coming off of this. It can also be lifted by just the bow and the stern point. It won't collapse. So it's got really nice heavy duty frames. Looking at this picture, bottom middle, there's a dolly that each of these come with that's got a little work platform. It's about 5 feet from the water line to the bottom of the keel. And so any person that's, you know, 5 feet or more can pretty easily stand up here and work on payload or some kind of integration exercises. So really nice there. The dolly fits in a trailer, and then you can take it straight to a boat ramp, and 2 people can walk it down a boat ramp, no problem. And then you just float it directly off the dolly. You know, getting it onto a boat can be a little more challenging, but as long as you've got access to a dock that you can dolly it up to, you can have it right there. So that's super basic on launch and recovery. And you know, once we start talking about using it, you know, this to me, I could talk about this for quite a while, but I won't. This is just a screenshot of the current command and control system. There's a lot more to it that you can see. Oh, for those of you that are looking at lat longs, you can maybe even figure that that's Pepper Park over there in the South Bay. This allows you to task the vessel, to change its waypoints, to monitor any kind of systems, and even monitor some of the basic sensors. My take on all this is that, well, there's a guy named Eric Patton who started this whole idea, and I knew Eric over at Esri for quite a while. He had this briefcase that he was carrying around at the Esri user conference, probably summer of 2013 or 14. And he showed me what was inside of it. And it was a little plastic model of the Gen 1 that hadn't even been built yet. And so let's call it 8 years later, we've gone through 3 different vessels, creating the hardware mix, getting the hardware mix just right. And then this command and control interface has also sort of developed a nice set of in-house command and control. You can get to it through the Iridium satellite network, through, what is it, 900 megahertz? Sorry, I'm not up on all my frequency right now. Radio, and then also through Wi-Fi. So you can interact with it and get this interface control of it through 3 main frequencies. But my take is that robotics engineering and geospatial technology is the real mix here. And we're starting to talk about how to integrate some of these newer web geospatial technologies right into this interface, so that theoretically, not only are you controlling the ship, but you're like looking at your data feed coming in, if it's light data, right? If you can transport, I don't know, ocean acidification, you know, pH or whatever you're looking at. But let's say you're looking at chlorophyll and you're doing HAB work. I think you'll be able to look at the chlorophyll data come in and on the fly potentially run some analytics against sea surface temperature or some mid-ocean factors or some other chemical factor that you already have in a geospatial repository. So to summarize that, I think the command and control interface is the thing that's really going to get better and better quickly now, and integrate analytics with data collection so that you can do some stuff on the fly or quickly right after without switching off the platform. I will give you another preview of this. Last month during some testing, they actually passed control of this to several different sites. And that's kind of impressive too, and a little scary, right? That you can go, okay, you take over, and someone on another continent's driving the boat all of a sudden. So I'm going to kind of drop into this intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, but it's really just data collection, right? And mainly in this world, it's video and photographs, but any kind of sensor. So what they've created is, they being Ocean Aero, is a nice package for this ISR mission. It's a standard military ops, basically. And there's some standard sensors that you can see on the right-hand side. They're nice enough to package up to 8 of them in a Connex container and ship them all out wherever you want. And then here are some ISR specific payloads that come in that package, if you will. There's enough space as long as you have either watertight um, boxes or cones. We're seeing a lot of cylinders that are working out for watertight. There's not room for a big Pelican box, for instance, if you need to keep a computer dry. But containerizing some of that in some of these cargo spaces in the vessel is an art form in itself. And multiple sensors isn't typically a problem. Of course, with anything, power is the big deal. If you've got some sensor gobbling down power, like a multi-beam sonar, chances are it's going to have to get up into the sunshine often to keep on mission there. But I want to talk about this integrated battle problem mission that we did last April with several different Navy folks. And the short version, I won't read this entire agenda, but basically they wanted to see the vessel launch and go somewhere. So Newport to Catalina. And then one of the first things was we wanted to see it loiter in place for a set amount of time. So stay, basically an expensive buoy for a while. And then all the AIS obstacle avoidance just needed to be observed. And then they wanted to literally do some mine countermeasure simulation. And so they did that back at Point Loma. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then they literally wanted to pass control to Australia, where there's an American force participating in this test. So this was a 5-day mission that we did just last month or month before last now. And here's how it turned out. I'll just go over, you can see the route again. The highlights were everything was met or exceeded. They did it in 4 days instead of 5. This is a classic. Vehicle withstood an unplanned 2-meter free fall, undamaged. Well, that wasn't to the ground, that was to the water. And evidently there was some miscommunication and or a mechanical fail, but as it was getting ready to launch, it fell. And I wasn't there, so I didn't get the real story yet. But it's nice that it can take a pretty heavy hit into water. Many different government personnel repeatedly switched control. So they went from a URL into the Iridium. They also used the 900 megahertz. I think I'm saying that megahertz right. It might be on here. As well as Wi-Fi just right next to it in a support vehicle. You can just log into it. The traffic avoidance and waypoint changes all worked out well. And the command and control passed on to another group. And interesting, it's kind of stealthy. There was no radar return observed at less than a quarter nautical mile range. That brings up all kinds of questions like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends on if you want to be seen or not. So there's a lot of lots of people talking about, well, when you want to be seen, you want to be seen. And when you don't, you don't. So some other things you may have read up if you can see those on the screen, but all in all, everyone was quite pleased. And this was CPC's first sort of breakdown, shakedown mission with the vessel on an extended trip. And I'll get to that in a minute, and I'll get to why CPC in a minute. But just to kind of catch up and make a break point here, last year, 6 of these were delivered. And this year, we're really focusing on payload integration. And if you stop and think about it, they spent so much time working on the vessel that all of the technology is sort of wrapped up in the house system. And now that there's demand for different sensor packages, some of those packages, like a multi-beam echo sounder, need to get access to the INS for precise time and precise position. And there's some really interesting challenges when you build a vessel to not be hacked. It's not easy just to go, oh, I'll share all my precise time and position with this hacker who happens to be called a multi-beam sonar. So you have to treat every payload as if it's evil force. And so again, the robotics engineers are having a good time with secure sharing aboard the vessel, just so the thing doesn't get taken over by somebody. Next year, they're really working, and now they're really working the swarming capabilities, and I'll talk about the next 2 years in just a second. So again, it exists. There are happy owners of some of these vessels now, and that's all pretty recent. In fact, the last of the 6 just got delivered. So what about, 20 and 30 and 40 different customers? Ocean Aero has been focused on developing the vessel, and when we started getting to know them with CPC, it just seemed like a perfect fit that Cardinal Point captains can help deliver and train and manage these. So quick word about CPC, formed in San Diego with a retired Coast Guard officer named Jordan Cosino. Some of you might have met Jordan before. I saw some of your names on the attendee list. And basically, CPC's grown into a government contractor that holds lots of different contracts with Navy and NOAA, in particular with the Office of Marine Sanctuaries. And it's moved from just vessels and gear to science and other capacities. And I came on board a year ago to sort of build a geospatial operation to help people analyze that sort of data. We've got 150 or so employees dispatched, embedded with the Navy or NOAA all over the US EEZ, really. And we've got lots of ship time and lots of water time. This was just a kind of a fun project. One of our employees did his master thesis on where the German U-boat 576 was, and translating German ship logs and doing all kinds of funny stuff. He had a pretty good idea of where this went down off of Ocracoke in North Carolina. And he knew that Nautilus was going to be going off to Bermuda. And he asked if they would take a specific route down the East Coast before they headed out. And he had them fly right over this spot. And they turned on the multi-beam. They said, we can't mow the lawn, but we can turn the multi-beam on and collect some data. And sure enough, they saw a bump right where he thought they'd see a bump, in 700 feet of water. So they had a decent wide swath. And the next year they sent some robotics down and got a scan. And 2 years later, we got two two-person submersibles out there for multiple days of human eyes and some other laser scanning and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's just, there's a big bathymetry project happening in Thunder Bay with all kinds of legacy bathymetry all being loaded into one GIS system. I've been having a fun time with that one. And then, we're helping with the sanctuary expansions. This is an Esri story map of all the new, now final approval, expanded sanctuary areas. So that's just a quick note about CPC and a shameless plug for geospatial support. I'm sure with Dawn Wright's visits, when you are exposed to those, she talks about Esri and whatnot. And I'm now doing that with CPC and integrating with a lot of Esri customers, of course, NOAA and the Navy. So it's kind of fun. So in the end, this sort of partnership between CPC and Ocean Aero allows humans that know how to get out on the water quickly and efficiently and safely to launch and recover. Ocean Aero still handles a lot of the configuration side of payload, but CPC's got a lot of that sort of talent too. And then, of course, what about recovering the data, offloading the data, processing, depends on what you have. And then what about then taking that and doing the geospatial analytics and creating story maps and dashboards of all that data that was collected. So in all, Ocean Aero is focusing on the hardware and the technology, and CPC's focusing on launch and recovery and data. I mentioned I'd tell a little bit more about where things are headed. Of course, the swarming bit is where we are even now, but moving into next year. For 2023, we're really going to start looking at what else needs to happen to the vessel itself. This keel right now, they're working on making that retractable just to save some vertical space for stowage. There's some other ideas happening with the hardware itself, but I think most of that is going to be literally looking at software integration, and they're even talking about launching aerial drones from a modified deck of the Triton to literally charge drones back up. Like the thing will land and link to the solar panels to get a charge and then fly away again. It's very Terminator kind of stuff, it seems like. Then if we look 5 years out, 4 years out, really, I'm convinced it's going to be about battery tech and power, as well as opening up that bottleneck of communication, restrictions. Who knows how quickly this marine broadband will really be available, but it seems like there's a lot of different people working on that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in the next few years to really be able to push some fat data back and forth to these vessels. So again, it's a real thing. We had 4 of them out there in March, out in front of the naval yards in the South Bay, and I'm still surprised no one came out to talk to us, because we had drones in the sky and 4 vessels sailing right in front of all these naval ships, and we decided that they were listening to our conversations and they didn't need to come talk to us. And I hope I didn't go too fast, because that was my first trip to San Diego post-COVID, or not quite post-COVID, back in March. And it was my first non-wetsuit swim in La Jolla Cove. And I'm gonna see if I can find the chat window to see if we're ready for Q&A. I'm going to stop the share unless I need to go back. Yeah, if I need to go back. Well, I'll let you, Vanessa, take over.
Thank you, Drew. Awesome. Thank you so much for that great presentation. All right, everybody, feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A button in the bottom center of your screen or in the chat. Or if you want to unmute yourself and ask away, please feel free to do so. I know it looks like most of the questions I think that were submitted beforehand were answered. Aha, we've got one coming in from Rasmus. Can you fit any instrumentation on the top of the mast? For example, a small LiDAR?
The question is asked almost daily in the conversations I have. Most of the comms equipment is on the back of the vessel there with those conning towers, but there are lots of parties that are interested in using the mast. And so the short answer is yes. I mean, we had a GoPro up there just to get some height. And I think a water resistant LiDAR, even potentially, the iPhone LiDAR potentially could go up there. So I would give it a yes, and then the ... and we got integration is the big deal right now. Will it have its own power? Will it have its own GPS? All that stuff. It's actually easier to have. I mean, we bolted a multi-beam sonar onto the thing and put its own GPS on top of a Pelican box just to shove it out there and have it collect data, and without connecting to the house INS. And so the payload gets tricky. Is like, what about power, and do you need access to the the house, precise time and precise positions. But strapping something out there that collects its own data and already knows where it is, that's great. And I'll add this, just in case another one comes in. 7 miles by car, 3 miles in a straight line is where these things are manufactured from Scripps. And so I worked with another class, the Hack for the Oceans class. And basically, anytime you want to gather in numbers or privately for a little on-site tour, somebody can be there to show you around. I'm working from North Carolina and get out there once a month when I can. But it's actually a pretty fascinating shop to see all this stuff. And they can even test indoors because the roof is so high and so thin, the GPS still comes through the building. So we can do lots of testing right there indoors in the shop.
Great, thanks, Joy. I think he had a follow-up question. He was asking, can you fit something like a zoo cam or a zoocam or a larger plankton cam on the bow?
I don't know, because I don't know what those cams are. I don't know how big they are. Chances are, if they're watertight and have a way to bolt, they're pretty creative folks when it comes down to modifying stuff on it. Like the Defense Department has wanted all kinds of stuff on the bow, on the stern, and especially if it doesn't conflict with the hydrodynamic, capability of the vessel itself. And Rasmus, I'm happy to continue our conversation by email. I know we're connected there finally.
Yeah, and if you want to unmute and ask any more follow-up questions, Rasmus, feel free to, or let me know. Matt has a question. How do you clear obstructions from the keel, like kelp lines, etc.?
Yeah, that's, I know enough about biofouling to know that it's real, and it's a manual thing. And so I guess we haven't had a bad foul up in any of the long tests. We haven't gone out to Hawaii yet. There's going to be some Gulf of Mexico, big, long excursions. And I just sort of hold my tongue. I'm like, well, we need to be concerned about that because you can't tow kelp train, it just will stop. And I imagine they're going to be able to just see that while they're monitoring the mission and realize it's not going anywhere. And even with thrusters, it's burning power. So that's a manual deal.
Excellent. All right, looks like we got another question here from Jit. Have any tests been done with towing instruments or deploying something out of the bay of the platform? For towing, I'm imagining something like an acoustic array. Oil and gas would be interested in this for something like a mini seismic survey. For deploying, I'm picturing a CTD being dropped and recovered to sample greater depths beyond the 200 meters vessel can reach.
Yep. So the conversation is that's another constant, and there have not been any specific tests done, but they're talking about power consumption and there's an awareness, especially like you said, in the oil and gas community, they're definitely wanting to tow some sensor arrays. Well, all right.
Excellent. I don't see any more questions coming in. Oh, here we go. Keith's asking, how deep can she dive?
Well, rated for 200 meters. So, I don't know what starts happening beyond that, but it's probably not good. And I know they're pretty rigorous. The whole QA and testing that they do at Ocean Aero, they've got some tanks, they've got different bays where, for instance, the keel goes up and down for 3 days, or just over and over and over, because they're trying to find weak points before they go to sea. And yeah, so I think it's done 200 meters and they just don't want to go further. But that's the limit there. And again, it can stay stationary at depth, or it can move on with those twin thrusters at depth. So there is a nice stealthy sort of, or safety under a storm feature there.
And there was a question that came in before on mission duration.
Oh, well, again, I think that's really a factor of sunshine, like high latitudes in that high latitude or low latitude summer. It could really still do well in non-ice environments. But what we're seeing so far is that it's really a factor of biofouling and making sure you're getting charged up to keep going. There's a couple other details around, you know, it's got a signal that it puts out so it can be found even if all power's out. It's kind of got a little bit of a pinger that still will go with all power. And, you know, it's got bags to clear any of the ballast and just come up. So it has a couple of safety mechanisms in case it gets into some kind of trouble. But, you know, the word indefinite comes to mind, but there's so many factors when you're dealing with the ocean that indefinite is a big claim. So, but we are talking, you know, multi-week, multi-month. They're gonna take one up to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands this winter and work in the monument up there. And the idea is to just cut it loose for 2 or 3 months off of Nautilus. So we'll see. That's still plan working into being, but that's when I'll start getting real excited if, you know, you can do 2 or 3 months with the coral researchers up there. It could be fun.
Excellent. Any final questions from the group? Thank you for such a great presentation, Drew. That was really awesome. And yes, everybody, this has been recorded and will be posted on the Scripps Technical Forum website, which has been dropped in the chat, and on the Scripps Technical Forum playlist on the YouTube channel.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Hope to see you in person soon and appreciate the time.
Excellent. Thank you, Drew. And thank you all so much for joining today. We'll be having our next one next Wednesday, June 9th with subsea imaging. So tune in for that. Hope you have a great day.
Bye for now.